Well, today we have the privilege and luxury of having a chat with Reverend Jeff Challoner. Jeff came to Red Deer in the early 70s, as he'll tell us about, as a minister at the United Church here in Red Deer. That's the Gates Memorial United Church, named after the original pioneer who established Red Deer as part of his avocational interest or work at the time. But perhaps we can start there with your own background and training and what brought you to Red Deer, Jeff.
Sure. How far do you want to go back?
Well, just the overview.
Oh, just the overview.
Yeah.
Okay. I was born in the 30s and grew up. This was in England, so I was born in England, grew up there. All through the war, we lived in England, so I came to Canada after the war in that would be 52.
You would have been there then when King George was the king?
Yes, absolutely, and the new queen, yes.
The Queen
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth, I think, was princess then.
That's right. And I was, I must say, I and my family and my grandmother and so on were all pretty well royalists in the sense of supporting the royal idea. Yes.
Well, Canada, she's still the head of state for Canada, and
yes,
her funeral led by 4 RCMP on RCMP horses are leading the funeral parade this morning.
Yes, I'm hoping they will replay that because I was not able to see that at the time. So I'll hope. And
what brought you, or how did you arrived in Canada, and then
that's right.
You eventually came to Red Deer.
Oh, okay. But first of all, I was a couple of years down in Toronto. That's where I started after coming to Canada, and actually had a couple of small churches that I helped at, because when in England I was trained as a Methodist local preacher. So that a local preacher, of course, has a regular job and then does the preaching on the Sundays. Maybe in a quarter might have 2 services. So anyway, so I came to Canada and emigrated and became I had my job, my career job was drafting. I was a draftsman, engineering draftsman, yes. So when I came to Canada, I wanted to continue that job. In other words, I wanted to be part-time as I was before. I had no intention of entering the ministry full-time. I wanted to do it part-time because I enjoyed the other side of life. And but I was persuaded, shall I say, to go into the ministry full-time.
Oh, well, congratulations.
Well, I did it reluctantly.
Yeah. You're kind of reminding me of my own grandfather, who was a minister in southern Saskatchewan, but he didn't support the union of the Methodists and the Presbyterians, and remained a Presbyterian all his life.
Oh, I see. Yes.
Anyway, you eventually went, I presume, to a number
came
of
to
churches.
Canada. Was in Toronto first for 2 years, and then was persuaded to go into the ministry full-time, which meant training. And so I was told to get trained as a minister, which meant taking arts and theology. And so for that, the friend that had persuaded me to go into the ministry, who was another minister, said, go out west from, this was in Toronto, go out west where there's more heathen. So that's sent me. That's what he said. So
interesting Eastern observation.
Eastern observation. That's right. So so I came west to Winnipeg, and did all my training in Winnipeg, the arts and theology.
Correct.
3 years. Or 3 years of arts and 3 of theology. It would have been 4 of arts, but they gave me 1 year for my engineering training in England. So, anyway.
So you arrived in heathen country. And,
yes, and I loved it. Yes. So I took the training in Winnipeg and then asked to be ordained actually in Vancouver, which was by then near where my mother was living. And then after that was assigned to my first ordained charge, which was Vanderhoof, BC. I'd never heard of the place. I had to look it up on a map to find out where it was. It was a tiny dot in BC.
Near Prince George.
Near Prince George, that's exactly right. And so I was there for 2 years, which was the official time. And then I was glad to get out. And interestingly enough, the same minister who got me into this whole business of the ministry called me to his church, which was in Winnipeg at that time. I got to Winnipeg. He then had gone to Victoria. So anyway, I stayed in Winnipeg and served in Winnipeg as an associate minister, right, under a senior minister, because I was junior in rank but senior in age to the other minister. Anyway, so that was my first experience of ministry in Winnipeg, and then sent to Vanderhoof. From Vanderhoof, I came to Edmonton because this minister who got me into this whole business had gone to Edmonton. Mind you, when I got to Edmonton, he'd already gone to BC, but that's another story. So then I came to Edmonton, right? And I served at, where would it be? Metropolitan United Church in Edmonton for 5 years. Mm-hmm. And then another 5 years after that out at Sherwood Park. And then came to Red Deer.
And that would be in about what year?
We came to Red Deer in 1974.
Correct. Okay.
Yes, that's right.
And that was to the Gates Church.
That's right. I was looking for a position, and there was a position opened at Gates United Church, Memorial United Church, for a team minister. They wanted a team. So I went there with another ministerial friend of mine, Reverend Al McNeil. So the two of us served at Gates Church as a team.
Do you have some reflections on what Red Deer was like and what the congregation of the church were like at that time?
Yes, one thing was that when I left Sherwood Park, it was the population was 30,000, right? Came to Red Deer, 30,000. 30,000 when I came here. We were assigned to manses, which were the ministerial homes. And that was an interesting little thing because we didn't know which one was ours. My family, I mean. We didn't know which one to go to. Anyway, we went there, and we enjoyed our time at Gates. I was there for 3 years. And during that time, I should mention that when we were called to Gates Church, we knew we were coming into a divided congregation. There were splits in Gates Church at that time. And that was caused, possibly, to be honest, by the previous minister. His approach had caused splits within the congregation. So anyway, our job was to heal all those splits.
And do you remember what the primary problem was?
Well,
or issue?
One of the primary problems was his approach to the ministry was through spirits, a spiritual approach. When I say spirits, I mean almost spiritualism was his approach, and so we had to do something about that, and put the church on a regular, standard United Church basis, and so we worked hard at that, and I believe did a fair job. That was at Gates. But interestingly enough, after those 3 years at Gates, didn't really want to stay in the ministry at all. Because, as I may have mentioned, I was reluctant to go into the ministry in the first place. And because I preferred to stay as a local preacher, a lay preacher, meaning to have a regular job at the same time. That's what I preferred. But having been persuaded to go into the full ministry, then I had to put up with it. Put up with it in the sense that I was reluctant. I didn't want to do it. Mm-hmm. So after those 3 years, I was getting a bit antsy. I wanted to leave. So I didn't leave the ministry at all, completely. I went to do smaller jobs. So I helped out at places like Alex, Delburn, and so on. Often 2 years apiece.
Yeah, as a supply minister.
Supply minister, that's right. And I did that for the next few years. And it wasn't until actually 96, I think. No, that's when I left.
That's when you retired.
That's when I retired. So I was, the last place I was as a minister was at Edmonton, St. Paul's Church. St. Paul's Church in Edmonton for 5 years at the end. So that would be 91 to 96.
What brought you back to Red Deer then?
Oh, all right. After we retired, my wife's job was home care, and in Red Deer, and so we came and she continued her job as a home care nurse. Did so for 20 years or more. So that was a basis for us. As far as financial, it helped quite a bit because the other church side didn't bring that much money in.
What were some of the changes that you observed both in the United Church and perhaps more particularly within the ministry in Red Deer? Did you interchange with other ministers, and
yes.
Did you have activities that?
There was a ministerial association, yes, and we got together on a regular basis. I think once a month, to have a meeting of the ministers in Red Deer.
And that had been going on for
Oh
quite
yes,
some time?
that had been going on for a long time, and I think it continued for a few years after that. I don't think it's in operation right now.
And what were some of the things that you did or achieved as a group?
As a group, right? Well, we tried to be ecumenical in the sense of being open to each other's church. And so I actually preached in other churches. I was at the Presbyterian church for 2 or 3 years anyway, doing the work there in Red Deer. One of the smaller Presbyterian church, not the big one downtown.
Were you involved in any hospital work?
Yes. Well, I was, I suppose you'd call it a hospital chaplain, but not in a full sense. What I did was to take the service at the chapel, and I believe it was once a month or 2 or 3 times a month.
Was that in the hospital?
In the hospital, yes, in the hospital chapel. And I did that for quite a number of years. And in fact would be doing it right now, except that the last time before COVID, then COVID stopped it, and I applied to go back, and they weren't operating the chapel on that basis. So that was the end of that.
Did you also visit patients?
No. Yes. During my ministerial years, I did. That was part of the ministry, to do hospital visiting. Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. And from Gates Church. What we used to do was
you'd visit your congregation.
Oh, yes, yes. Visit our congregation, and went down the list and said, oh, yeah, he's from our congregation, she's from our congregation, I'll go to see them, and so on. Yes.
Okay. Is there anything else in terms of changes within the ministry in Red Deer that you'd like to comment on? I'm thinking particularly of the, I'm not sure of the phrase, but the origin of more ecumenical churches and
right.
Certainly facilities, church facilities that we've seen occur in the last 25 or 30 years.
I was always interested in the ecumenical side, to share services with other ministers, go to other ministers' churches, and feel a kinship with other ministers, yes, from different churches. Not so much the evangelical side. More the
classical,
denominational side. Yes, that's right.
Yeah. In terms of congregations,
yes.
though, they appear to have been quite successful in attracting congregations and followings.
Well, no. Over the last 10 years, I would say, there has been a decline in the number of people coming to church and trying to attract people into the congregation. It's gone down, unfortunately.
Is there a reason, or?
Well, yes, partly because people don't think. There are, this is an honest opinion, some of the evangelical churches, my wife and I would say, you leave your brain at the door and take what they give you, right? If it says this in the Bible, okay, that's what it means. No questions, that's what it says. But my approach, and I think the United Church approach, was no, that is not our approach. We ask questions. We say, how did that, when was that written? Who wrote it? Why was it written? What was the purpose behind it? And can we know any more about the history of this particular passage? And so that has been my approach ever since, to ask questions, to delve into the background of the Bible. I love the Bible. I like to read it. I like to read it out loud, including back to the old King James Version, to read it out loud, yes. But not to study it. I would study it in a more modern version. So that's what I do now. We have Bible study at our church, and along with the minister, she and I take the Bible study and really dig into it.
Is there a particular passage that comes to mind when you?
Well, we take every week, we take the lectionary. Now, the lectionary is a set of readings, which are universal in the sense of being in many churches being used. The same readings for that Sunday are used in many churches. Of course, the approach is different in almost every case, so that you go to a different church, you get a different sermon on that same topic, which is interesting. But no, we use the Revised Common Lectionary in our studies.
As I said, I followed in the footsteps of my grandfather, after whom I've been named, who was a Presbyterian minister, and I've always been struck by the quality of his life, the quality of his marriage, yes. And how just the example, whether you call it the model or the example that he set, yes. In part, I guess, of what he said, although I must admit I didn't attend many of his church services, but the quality of his life you could just see and feel, and it always struck me that if the quality of your life was shareable, significant as a model, that to some extent that would favor you as a minister.
I've always felt that, yes, my personal life has a lot to do with my ministry, so that how I think, how I approach life affects what I would say in the church.
There's an old expression that says if you can influence a child until he's yes. age 6, yes. you can influence him ecumenically for the rest of his life.
Right.
And I've been struck by the, I think we call it now the chartered school system.
Okay.
And in Alberta, and I'm just wondering what its place is. I think of our system having two aspects to it: the separate school system, the public school system, and now we have the public system developing its own chartered school. And I wonder what you think of those changes and whether they have a future to them or...
I don't like them. I am in favor of the public schools. I am not in favor of private schools or charter schools, for that matter. No. I think that it is taking away from, it is weakening the public school system. And I would support that all the way.
And in Alberta, we do have, at least in terms of attendance, participation, we have two systems, separate school or Catholic school system.
I'm not against I'm not against the separate school in the sense of the Catholic side of it. No, not at all. To me, that's a very genuine part. but it's the I was going to say the break-offs, the different approaches, somewhat in the evangelical style. I have trouble with some of that. Not that I was raised as a Methodist, and that's pretty evangelical in that sense. And so it doesn't bother me theologically, but it's what it does on the surface, how they approach the worship and so on.
You mean within the school?
Not within the school, within the church.
Within the church.
I'm not familiar with the school system. My kids, of course, all went through the school system, but I didn't know the background, no.
So if the question is what's the difference between a chartered school
Yes.
in the public system as there is one?
My answer would be I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't really know what a charter school is. I'd be interested to find out, because I know what the regular public school system is, but I don't know what this business of charter schools is, or public schools, or private schools either.
Although you come from a country that was actively involved in private school teaching.
Absolutely. Yes, I come from a country that had private schools, very much so. The elite of the of the side of the people, shall we say, often went to private schools. Mm-hmm. But I didn't. I went to a public grammar school and thoroughly enjoyed my time there. Yes.
Can I go back to your comment about
Yes.
a declining participation
Yes.
by the
Yes.
community and the public in denominational or evangelical or
Right.
churches? As we look to the future or into the future, do you see some of those trends continuing? And I'm not sure there's like a difference in Canada in terms of involvement of churches in politics churches in the political sphere, as opposed to, say, the United States. But here we've kept them quite separate.
Yes.
But do you foresee some of those either American-type changes or
I hope not.
Major changes occurring in our system?
No, I hope not. I would hope that there will be in the schools, there would be the public schools, and they can have private schools, yes. As I say, I was raised in England, so there was lots of private schools there. But we in the grammar school sort of thought that was a bit elitist for those people, so way out of our sphere.
Are there any other comments you'd like to make about religious affiliations within Red Deer as opposed to, say, Alberta mm-hmm. or elsewhere in Canada that make it unique or different?
I'm very keen on an ecumenical approach, that we can get together, share ideas, share services. If I'm all for that, actually, that we could worship in each other's churches. I have done a little bit of that, but I would be in favor of continuing that idea, and that we should have an ecumenical approach to the churches of Red Deer.
That perhaps is a nice note to end on. I think of Red Deer as being young.
Yes.
Modifiable, changeable, mm-hmm. evolving. but enthused and energetic,
Yes, yes.
and willing to change,
Yes,
willing to adapt, and willing to work together.
yes. For example, in our own congregation, I see it not necessarily as dying. No, I see it as growing, but very slowly. I see that there is hope there. I see ways to hopefully introduce more young people into our services. I would like to see that. But somehow there aren't that many young people around, as far as I can gather, connected with the church, families.
There are other terms for it, but a rate at which our population, our Canadian population is expanding has certainly slowed with the family size, and in my case, 5 down to almost 1, 1.5 to 1. Only, I guess, increasing because of immigration, which presents another set of backgrounds.
Yes, that's right.
And may have or will have a long-term effect on religious affiliations and denominations and respect for other religions and so on.
That's right.
And the challenges that come with acceptance.
I'm very much in favor of welcoming new people from other countries to come to Canada. Immigrants, if you like, yes, but refugees as well. And people from, say, Ukraine or whatever are having trouble in their own country to come to Canada and find freedom and peace. I'm all for that.
I think that's a lovely note to end on, especially given your viewpoint or reflections as you look back, covering so many years. If you were born in 1931, that makes you a little older than most of us, but with a lot more wisdom and
I hope that I've
gained experience, and I'm delighted.
Experience, yes. Wisdom, I'm not so sure about, but I hope so.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff. Thank you very much for joining us today, especially given that it's the Queen's funeral today, will be a benchmark day for many of us.
Yes. As I say, I have a great sense of warmth towards the royal family.